Hello and welcome to the Alice and Supply Chains podcast. This is another special bonus episode that we're doing outside of our usual monthly news discussions. But before we get started, if you like what you hear in this podcast, you can join 15,682 other subscribers and read the Alice and Supply Chains newsletter every month. To subscribe, you can go to tenchysecurity.com, click on Insights and News, and then Alice and Supply Chains newsletter. Also, if you're listening to this, why not subscribe to the podcast? You're already here. The button's right there. Just click it. We'd also love to hear your feedback. I would love you if you took a moment, left a comment. I love getting feedback on what we can do better on. If we're doing a good job, let us know. I love seeing that stuff. All right, let's start the show. I'm your host, Adrian and Alexandre, principal researcher and founder of the Defenders Initiative. And joining me is Alexandre Sierra, the CTO and co-founder of Tenchy Security. How you doing, Alex?
I'm fine. Super happy to be here. Super happy to have this special episode of the podcast with none other than Mr. John Hammond. So let's get to it. Super interesting topic.
Indeed, we've got a special guest today, John Hammond, and we're going to be discussing software supply chain attacks. And most of you probably already know John Hammond, probably one of the most popular cybersecurity creators around. And you might know him from his live streams, his YouTube videos, his training content and training company, or the work he does at Huntress. Welcome to the show, John. How you doing?
Hi, everyone. Goodness. Thank you so much for letting me join you here. Adrian, Alexandre, this is a real treat. Very, very excited to dive in, but I'm doing okay. You know, I feel like I'm trying to keep up. There are a lot of ambulances to chase these days, and I'm just trying to track down, okay, which ambulance matters the most?
Yeah, like I've got all my plans. Here's a podcast I'm going to do. Here's a blog post I'm gonna write, and then mythos.
Right.
Just wipe the whole slate clean. And it's funny. It like for companies as well. Like every time we see MCP come out or generative AI come out, everybody's roadmaps get wiped. Like even I've never seen a technology where even like Apple, like the consumer technology companies, roadmaps completely rewritten, right? You know, and it turned into a bit of an L for Apple here, but it was a win for a lot of cybersecurity companies. We saw a lot of cybersecurity companies pop up around generative AI.
Yeah, I know. Hey, I'll admit, right? My day job, I'm over one of the senior principal security researchers at Huntress, but I think we are part of the party just as well. We're really leaning in and we're trying to be all about it because I think it's clear, okay, threat landscape, cybersecurity, the whole face of the industry is like not a matter of, it is going to change or it is changing. I think it has already changed. So really trying to keep up, trying to stay toe to toe with any other threat actor or adversary. Look, we got to keep up, keep pace, move at machine speed the same way they do.
And just to kind of round out the threat landscape here, at the same time, like Alexandre and me were just talking earlier today about an attack that was accomplished because a threat actor paid $2,700 to an internal employee for some credentials, and that worked. There was no AI involved. It was just 10,000-year-old attack that works. Bribery.
Yeah. And bribery of an insider of a third party, no less, or a fourth party in some cases, where your third party is third party. And that gets you access to the data typically much more easily than going straight at the company that is handling the data or that owns that data, right? So, we have to simultaneously need to be covering the basics and the hygiene, which is nothing short of impossible to do given the complexity of what most companies have to handle as far as IT infrastructure. And on top of that, new technologies coming up that completely expand our attack surface, the wide adoption of SaaS. Job security, folks, even though people are talking about security people being replaced by AI, no, I'm not buying it. There's so many problems, more than enough jobs for everyone.
Yeah, we have a lot to do, without a doubt, but it's an interesting balancing act because I really agree that, hey, the majority of organizations, businesses, companies, teams, anyone, it's really still a matter of, like you mentioned, just kind of locking down the basics first and foremost. I'd love to be able to chase the newfangled whiz bang, cool, exciting, hype filled stuff in the AI innovation era, but at the same time, really, folks should still be tracking hey, do we have any like rogue remote monitoring and management in the environment? Or are credentials spilled out or leaked anywhere where they shouldn't be? They're probably a little bit more worried about just the phishing emails and all the threats that the world is already seeing and continues to see. But now, yeah, we are expanding the attack surface and just opening up things even further with all these new ideas and the new AI era for sure.
But at least we know we can always trust, the open source libraries we use and the patches we can install from our favorite vendors. Oh,
Great
wait.
segue. Yeah, I think we have a case study today, gentlemen. If we're willing to dive into it, I know we wanted to talk shop.
So to introduce that, I do consume a lot of YouTube, and I've noticed a lot of it's interesting just looking at the thumbnail evolution, right? Like a lot of these creators, like Low Level, Primogen, a lot of these guys like used to be, kind of well-rounded. Like they would talk about new AI technology, vibe coding, stuff like that. But like if you look at Low Level's thumbnails, if you just bring up all his videos, he only uses like it's just that one now. It's just like it's going to say hacked in red, and it's just like another thing got hacked. Like more and more that seems to be like obviously like people click on it. But legitimately, a lot of this software, and I think the reason open source is targeted so much, again, going back to the bribery thing, like it's much easier to social engineer a single developer who's often behind a lot of these things than maybe a whole company. I don't know. Maybe both are easy, right?
No, I'm right there with you. At least on the content creator front, if I may, as a fellow content creator, it is a certain tightrope you kind of have to walk in that, yeah, at the whims and mercy of whatever all holy algorithm for social media, having that sort of packaging of a title and thumbnail that's maybe a little bit more alarmist or sensationalism, doom and gloom, the sky's falling thing. I don't know. I struggle with that. I teeter back and forth, but to a certain extent, that's totally fair because yeah, we are seeing such a breakneck speed, pace, and cadence of these crazy, wild things hitting the headlines. Something else is compromised. Something else is popped. There's another breach. There's a new vulnerabilities in 0 days, or these supply chain shenanigans. And I feel like, hey, sometimes we still have to zoom out and look and realize like, oh, another one. Yeah, this is just the reality now. This is kind of the way things are. I know there's a question, oh, is this the new normal? Yeah, I think it's already been the normal that we're in right now.
Yeah, the one in particular that grabbed me, Low Level had a title, Stop Updating Your Software, and in parentheses, no, seriously. Ooh. I think that this might have been the Axios one. I don't know if it was which particular one this was about. But obviously that grabbed my attention. I was like, come on, like we're not going to like
really.
There's some nuance to discuss here, and I want to get your take, John. But I want to get into it because like updating software, like there's a software on my endpoints, right? We saw Notepad++ get hit. We've seen commercial backdoors and stuff like that, SolarWinds, things like that. But then there's like the software in your CI/CD pipeline, the stuff that you're shoving into your containers, the NPMs, because NPM not only goes in your production workload, but also on the developer laptops here. So there's like a lot of nuance in different levels of how quickly you update software. Can you afford to wait? And then time to exploit is the other factor here. We're seeing that reduced to almost nothing, where patch comes out in a couple of hours with or without AI, people have working exploits. So I just want to get your thoughts on stop updating your software.
No, I think you're honestly zooming in on kind of the right key word there, because in my mind, it is really genuinely nuance. Like, I don't want to go so far as to say, and I wouldn't say, oh, stop updating all software. I feel like we're kind of balancing between two options, really finding the lesser of two evils. Is that, sure, if you wait and don't patch, don't apply these updates because you're worried that, one of them might be bad, one of them might be malicious, one of them might break something or introduce malware, like we've seen with this Axios and NPM case study. But at the same time, if you just continue to wait and not patch or not update, well, then things will get ahead of you. The rapid change and pace of software and technology could even then have more bugs and more vulnerabilities and weaknesses that you just completely left behind, that you neglected and you forgot about, and you're almost in more of a vulnerable spot because you didn't keep updating. So it is totally a balancing act again, but I think, like you're alluding to, it's something that we almost need different update processes and different updating paths for different environments. Because, hey, Windows, yeah, your operating system, Google Chrome, your browser, whatever, those are things you probably have no concern. You'll want to keep updating to make sure they're the latest release, they're secure, they're keeping up with cutting stable security. But for those CI/CD, those environments that use maybe an open source library, I think we still need to probably add in a couple more guardrails or smart safety checks. There's been a lot of really cool new innovations to say, look, if some way, somehow, some open source package that's hosted on NPM or any of these repository management solutions like PyPy or others in different ecosystems, if one of those were to just hit the streets, hot off the press, it's totally new, the world has never seen it before, well, we still got to figure out, is this malicious? Is this true? Is this genuine?
Do some analysis.
Yeah. So if you give it a little bit of a time-bound sort of age duration of saying, look, I don't trust Axios version 1.41.1 until it's been out in the world and proven itself for maybe a week or however long, so that, hey, we can default to maybe some pinned dependencies that we know are the ones that we want stable and working for our software and part of your ingredients. But rather than just hot swapping whatever the grocery store or the farm gave you in the supply chain scenario, wait, make sure it's not rotten, make sure it's not poisoned, make sure it's not backdoored and infected.
And I feel that's such a natural thing to do, especially with software dependencies, right? Because the reasonable take you, if you have to update a software dependency, it probably has a lot of changes, functional changes. It will have a different number of bugs and vulnerabilities. We don't know a priori if it's bigger or smaller, just a different number, right? Because the code changed. And you should go through a proper process of, like, a developer is going to do a pull request, they're going to test it. It's going to run not only against automated testing, but maybe has to do some sort of functional testing, some QA people will look at it. If you just naturally put that as something that you have to treat on the current sprint, and then you go through the whole process of testing it, it would already probably give you enough time for, if this is malicious, for it to be discovered, right? Because typically people are running sprints of 2 weeks, right? So if you're doing, I think the mistake here is, unlike what you can do with like trusted software providers like Microsoft or Google, or where you can probably set automated patching on, say, desktop systems that are less critical. I would never do that. I would never have something where every time I'm deploying a new system, I'm getting whatever the latest version is from PyPy or NPM. I'm getting the latest version of this container image without it having gone through the development process. Does that track for you, John, at all?
That makes sense to me. It to a certain extent, I don't want to say dog fooding because it's not quite the right word, but that is close to, hey, just kind of doing the due diligence before we slap something into production, and to actively always genuinely running systems that we haven't been able to battle test first and foremost.
And I think the way it feels, if you just read the headline, like one headline says, you idiot, you didn't patch fast enough. And then the next headline says, you idiot, you patched too fast. But the reality is not every patch is a security update, right?
Right.
Like these things are often separated out, like just, a minor version update or major version update. That's where you might have functionality changes, might have breaking changes and stuff like that, versus something that's just labeled as a security fix for these 2 or 3 CVEs or something like that. Like we shouldn't treat all software updates the same, right?
I think that's exactly right. And I think it takes a little bit of, I hate falling back to that word, but nuance, but context, but just understanding what's in your environments. And it's almost sort of a mindset shift, because with a lot of classic vulnerability management, right, we're thinking, are we missing a patch, or are we missing some new updates? But in this scenario, it's like you're waiting for something that could have affected you, something that, okay, might be compromised because a vulnerability is an open door. But with scenarios like this supply chain spook here and Axios and NPM, there's sort of like an already established point in time where we're skipping a step. We're not just asking, are we missing a patch? We're saying, oh, were we already affected because there was a 3 hour or however much time window duration where, hey, there was a blast radius and impact already occurred. So at that point, I know it's weird, we're skipping a step, but that's why you totally need that asset application inventory list. You got to know the ingredients, how the sausage is made. I wish I could fall down the rabbit hole for software bill of materials, but I know that's a can of worms. There's a lot to talk about.
So I the way I advise customers, I've started recommending people split things out. Like you mentioned, John, traditional vulnerability management. In traditional vulnerability management, there's some kind of vulnerability management tool that runs a scan and it tells you where you get problems, where you need to fix stuff. But I've seen people referring it to VulnOps now, and it seems clear like we actually need two separate processes. There's the traditional process where somebody at Tenable, somebody at Sneak or Wiz or something like that, at the moment of disclosure, they see the vulnerability and they build something, engineer something, put it in a product. And the next time you run a scan, you're told about that thing. That's kind of a long process. That might take 24 hours. It might take a week for the news of this new vulnerability to make it back to you from a scan. And then the other side of it is, so I think of that as a scan driven approach. And I think it's great for compliance. It's great for stuff that isn't an emergency. And then there's what I hear people calling a VulnOps approach. I think of an intelligence driven approach. Like nobody waited to check on Axios. Nobody waited on their tool to tell them that they had it, right? They saw the headline and they immediately went and checked to see if they had Axios somewhere. And you need that really good asset inventory, as you're saying, John, so that you can just do a query, right? And you're not having to just scan stuff from scratch to figure out if it exists in your environment somewhere. But I think it makes sense to split those, because one process looks more like incident response, right? You're going to drop everything, go check for it. And the other process does not look anything like incident response. It's part of GRC. Like it's almost a different department within your security team.
Yeah. And I like that approach. I feel like that's good because it's one of the things that ultimately, I don't want to sound maybe too much of a pessimist, but sometimes this feels, I don't want to say inevitable in that, look, we have people kind of being the maintainers, the ones that have the keys to the kingdom for the underpinnings of our internet and the software that we all kind of rely on. So when we go back and forth between what might be a technical control, okay, fixing things with blinky boxes and things, at the end of the day, we got poor individual human being that made the mistake. They were compromised. Then their access was leveraged and taken advantage of. Jason Saman was the individual that, okay, is the Axios maintainer. He was fooled. He was deceived. He fell for social engineering that I could fall for, that you could fall for, that any of us totally could.
Only means he's human. Yeah.
Yeah. Raising the user education and awareness. I don't want to sound like a broken record on our beating a dead horse, because I know we always scream and shout from the rooftops, but my goodness, that is absolutely one of the best tools in our toolkits. We just still got to make people aware of what this stuff looks like.
Yeah, and for people who don't know the story behind the Axios one, like it wasn't like he just got a phishing email, it was a click fix type of scenario, but there was like weeks or months of like gaining his trust from this particular party, leading up to the moment where, during a fake Teams meeting, to get audio working, they convinced him to copy and paste something into his terminal. He thought he was fixing Teams audio. He was installing actually an info stealer instead.
The craziest thing to me, because again, that social engineering buildup is just kind of mind blowing, because they do, threat actors, adversaries, cyber criminals, try to make it a whole charade, a whole facade. They put on this act. So yeah, that long tail, they're in it for the long run, where they have a full Slack workspace set up. They invite the victim in, make it look legitimate. They have channels where, hey, fake employee people are even dropping LinkedIn articles. So they think, oh, wow, this looks like a functioning place. And then they say, yeah, let's get on this Microsoft Teams call. But then they kick the can down the road and they say, hey, sorry, we can't make it this week. Let's schedule for another time next week.
Yeah.
And they do it again. They do it again. They like lead you on to
that's a key, yeah, they, you know, like rushing it. Like that's what we're used to in like, you know, when we tell people how these attacks happen, you know, we tell them there's always this element of, you know, trying to make it urgent. Like, I'm going to call with your CEO right now. I need you to go buy a bunch of gift cards. We got to have them by noon. Right. You know, there's always this element of, you know, just, I'm missing the word I'm looking for here, you know,
immediacy.
But there's
urgency,
immediacy.
For sure.
Pressure, you know, there's always this pressure and, you know, North Korea, who I think was behind this one, like they've got an expert at like, just being patient and, you know what, we couldn't meet this week, but let's hold it off. Let's push it another week. You know, like that's the kind of thing where you're like, okay, like that's not a box I'm checking from my security awareness that I learned, you know? So now it gets trickier to detect these kinds of things. And for a country that's not particularly known for socializing a whole lot outside their country, North Korea is exceptionally good at this.
Yeah, they do have some tricks up their sleeve for sure. But I got to be honest, I think it boils down to trust to a certain extent, in more ways than one, right? We have trust in transitive dependencies and the underpinnings, again, of, okay, what we rely on for software components amongst the supply chain. But even, yeah, how everything that we have been so trained to look out for, something that we're so used to cruising through, like, okay, troubleshooting, fixing something. The click fix social engineering lore is to literally, put that in the middle of a CAPTCHA, like I'm not a robot checkbox we're so accustomed to seeing. Or whenever we click I accept cookies, a cookie consent banner, anything with, a failed HTTPS certificate, all of these things that we just we're used to cruising through, click next. Yeah, they're totally taking advantage of that.
Still go to the site. Advanced, still go to the site. Yeah.
This was so well done, and this guy is working tirelessly for no money to contribute something that the entire internet finds useful. I have a hard time attributing any fault behind what happened to him.
Oh yeah,
he was really 100% a victim here, and we just have to thank him for the work he does maintaining useful software. In this case, that's not always the case. Adrian knows sometimes I'll look at something and say, these guys have some of the blame. Now, that's not the case for this maintainer. But maybe for people that are listening here, they're not so deep in the weeds on how software supply chain security works. What are the consequences? So once North Korea gets the accounts and the credentials for the maintainer of a package, what can they do with it? What impact does this have on a company that is using that software as part of building software of their own?
This episode is brought to you by Zanshin, built for a cooperative, continuous, and comprehensive approach to third-party cyber risk management. Annual vendor reviews make little sense in a world where cloud-first and AI-enabled third parties are changing their software, infrastructure, and security controls every day or multiple times a day. Traditional security rating solutions perform staggered testing of your third party's external attack surface, often retesting each finding or service only once every few weeks. Zanshin is the only security rating solution that combines both traditional outside-in testing with comprehensive non-intrusive inside-out scanning, including cloud, AI, and security solutions used by your third parties. And all environments are fully rescanned daily by default, so you and your third parties can react in a timely fashion. Get truly continuous third-party security monitoring now by visiting tenchisecurity.com and requesting a free trial.
Ooh, well, if I may, once they kind of put this thing out in the wild, once they set it in motion, if that backdoored or compromised package is now public and available, just as you can imagine, all the sort of software development life cycles or build processes or CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment or delivery, those are just always spinning, always running to keep making sure, okay, your software, what you produce, or companies and maybe programs and applications you use and run could have that trickle down into your environment in that weird, risky, third-party, sinister, unknowing supply chain scenario. Because hey, you push one domino over and they all fall down. You poison the roots of the tree and all the branches die. Like, we could figure out whatever idiom or simile really makes the most sense for you, but ultimately, you could be affected from that blast radius that maybe you just weren't aware of. So again, I know Adrian's point was like, look, we got to have the mental mindset shift of, hey, we need to make sure we're all buttoned up and ready for that incident response mode, and less the classic traditional vulnerability management, weighing and assorting. We really need to have tempered expectations to do both.
And so where that would show up maybe on a third-party cyber risk management team, which is what we're always trying to discuss here, I'm thinking is, if I'm buying software from a company and they're not doing their proper due diligence when they're using third-party dependencies, maybe you're buying software that has been poisoned. Again, that's what happened with SolarWinds.
Right.
Through a different mechanism, they hacked into the CI/CD pipeline, but that's the idea. You got software updates from SolarWinds, and they had embedded malicious content in it, and that could be the case, not necessarily with Axios, but with other dependencies. You could have a SaaS application that is maybe using as part of the software that they're using to run that service and provide that service to you. They could be now running malicious code that was inserted in one of the packages that up until now was benign and they've been using for years. And that could lead to a scenario similar to what happened with Bybit and SafeWallet, where someone poisoned the software of SafeWallet, and then when Bybit used their software to do a transaction, hey, what did the money go, or the Ethereum go? And the North Korea, again, the same guys, stole $1.5 billion with a B on a single cybersecurity incident. But I think there's something else that maybe people don't realize, that this could lead to the compromise of the developer machines or any environments where the CI/CD activities are executed. Because maybe you can go over this a little bit, but like just installing the package locally could lead to some scripts being executed in that environment. So it could lead to an infrastructure compromise as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sorry we didn't give that as much due diligence as we could have to get into some of the nitty gritty here. But in this scenario, I know we're using this Axios NPM as just a case study, as just our example here. But that scenario was ultimately a kind of remote code execution to the sense of like command and control, to the sense of how a remote access Trojan was now put in place on all the devices, all the hosts, all the servers, maybe workstations that had that package in play, and then updated or installed during that exposure window, maybe 3 hours a time when it was public before it got taken down. I do want to, if I may, stress just kind of how quick that happens. I know I'm over at Huntress, right? And we're kind of seeing, the world start to explode and sit in pieces and pockets of the industry. And that thing triggered, it would detonate just 89 seconds after it went live on the NPM repository. Like, it took a minute and a half just about. So it's almost instant when, okay, these things that you might not be tracking or aware of for your pipelines, your CI/CD work, but what that did is enable an open door for the threat actor or hacker to keep operating and do further post-exploitation, or exfiltrate out the secrets, the keys, the tokens, the API credentials, cookies, whatever, so that they could then use that further access for anything else they want. Just as you were alluding to, Alexander, it's, hey, yeah, that's an infrastructure problem now, because maybe the developer machines themselves, not just the servers part of the system, are up and running hit, but even the people's own devices that uses the software that this is all reliant on.
And one of the patterns I've seen, as I study breaches, because I spend a lot of my time studying, gathering details and studying breaches, is that, initially the company will come out and they'll say, it's fine. Like it just impacted this one file transfer device. It just impacted a developer's machine. They only got access to dev. It's okay. Everything else is like, I think it was SonicWall last year. It was impacted 5% of customers. There was a little bit of customer data in dev. And then 3 months later, again, and like less headlines now, the initial breach headlines have passed. Actually, there was a path from dev to prod, and 100% of customer details
I'm shocked, Adrian. I'm shocked. You
actually
mean
there was a path from the developer's laptop to prod, so
actually
like
the developer
later,
was admin in prod. Yes.
Yeah.
Which again tracks with the Bybit example, because even though it was not through a software supply chain compromise, it could have been, but they were able to gain a foothold in the developer's laptop. And from there, pivot into the SaaS environment where the code was run, like the production environment. There might have been intermediate steps, but eventually they got there. And again, because developers will install the packages locally to work on the software, like when they're updating stuff, their machines might be the first ones to be compromised, right? And if they have privileges to accessing product, if they have secrets lying around to sensitive that allows them to access sensitive data, that's a problem. And the other way we've been seeing attackers target that is through like malicious VS Code extensions and other things that get at developers and exploit that level of access they have. Because any IT security professional will tell you, hardening developer machines is one of the hardest things. You can run an allow listing software on like someone from sales or from accounting, but a developer, they need to be installing new tools and running containers, and then who knows what's running inside those containers, right? And things that have a lot of plugins like VS Code or whatever IDE.
Only OpenClaw knows. The developer doesn't even know what's running in those containers.
Right. So that's a big challenge, right?
No, I'm glad you threw in OpenClaw, right? Our AI overlords are going to change the game. They already have. But
yeah,
to that end, I think that has been really a good stark reminder. Well, yeah, we're in the rat race. We're seeing one new headline, one new breach, one new compromise, one new hack, one new YouTube video with a funny thumbnail every other day. But this one was an especially hard slap in the face, because I know the AI era, and I keep saying those words, but realistically, no one is really looking at the code that they're cranking out anymore. No one is looking at what their package.lock.json, whatever file, really contains for other parts and pieces and puzzle pieces that it will build from. So I don't really know what's in the ingredients anymore or how the sausage is made. I just kind of trusted the robot to do it. So that has been a really wild learning curve, and I think is going to continue to be, where it looks like that trust, what is the software supply chain's like Achilles heel and biggest weakness, is now kind of vulnerable. It's naked in the wind because no one's just looking at the code that they're writing these days.
Right. Like the, the baseline, like what we're looking for here, like we're still in this stage where like amazing AI built something and it works, like they're not looking super closely at it and like, but why did you really need 37 libraries to pull this off?
Yeah. Why is this 500,000 lines of code?
Yeah. Could you do this, say with 25,000 lines of code in 2 libraries? Like that's not, nobody's asking their AI agent to build software in a shrewd way, in a minimalist way or anything like that. Like the standard is, does it work? Right. And does it maybe later on, does it scale? It's kind of a F around and find out situation where like later on, we're going to be like, how did we go from in our enterprise, using 500 libraries to 500,000 different AI writing code, right? Like there's no standard anymore. There's no, we could have just used one standard library for authentication and for crypto, but we're using 200 different ones because AI is just like choosing whatever at random.
Well, forgive me, my friends. I didn't mean to come in all doom and gloom and try to sound all glass half empty on this one, but
job security. We already established it at the beginning. Job security.
I think there are real lessons learned at the very least.
So let's talk about those. I think that's a great segue. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Adrian.
Okay. No, you take the segue. I was going to make a segue, but I like your segue.
Okay. So the segue here is, what are the practices that one should expect a company has to mitigate those problems. I mean, solving it entirely, since we are depending on code written by strangers that are not paid to do this, and they're amenable human beings and amenable to social engineering. And if they were AI bots, they would be even more amenable to social engineering. By the way, that wouldn't solve the problem, only make it worse. But I digress. So what kinds of practices or controls or tools or processes would you expect a reasonable either a SaaS provider or a software developer have? So if I'm a TP7 person, what do I ask them about? What do I expect them to have as practices that I can audit and test to make sure this is more or less under control and they can survive something like this?
I think we've touched on a lot of these kind of as we've been talking, but if we were to try to wrap it up and put a bow on it, maybe speed run crash course, right? Absolutely keep updating your software. It's not a no, we just throw updates out the window situation, but know that comes with nuance. That comes with context and understanding of your environment, and different for each environments, plural. So you've got to have a little bit of an understanding of that, the visibility, the telemetry, the asset and application inventory list, and even the incident response checklist, the disaster recovery control populations and documentations and all the words for that. Like, we got to be ready for this thing. And if you wanted to go drill down to the technical controls, well, we've got user education and awareness on that soft side, but the nitty gritty could be those pin dependencies where it makes sense, those age release gates for kind of time in the wild. And then honestly, if I may say, it's really just having someone else kind of be there in the fight with you, having some sort of extra set of eyes that's keeping an understanding of what these packages look like, what this emerging tradecraft or threat actor activity is really up and about doing. That's how you could get that more intelligence driven approach to do your best to see the future. But I just know that, hey, one organization, one team, one crew, any team could see, oh, there's a weird looking process chain on this box, a couple of weird looking, I don't know, parent and child programs and applications that are running, but they might see that in just one pigeonholed box. Something, hey, I got to say, any of us that are trying to help provide security for the broad ecosystem, look, we see that across multiple organizations and accounts and companies and businesses. So we can see when that pattern emerges, we can really help get everybody in the fight, Avengers assemble, to try to tackle this thing the best we can.
Yeah. We'll put. One of my big concerns is that security can't make any of these changes, right? Like, any additional hardening we do, any additional patching and remediation we do, any security improvements we do, that's somebody else that has to do that. That's somebody in DevOps, that's a developer. It's like, this is additional burden we're placing in those people, and one of the things I've noticed, working with dev teams is that, there's this kind of expected split between how much time you spend on building new features, refactoring, re-architecting, re-engineering stuff, which is often like the unsung hero of scalability and a lot of things. Nobody ever sees it. And then kind of the third leg of that stool is, security updates and hardening and patching and that kind of stuff. And you kind of want to balance between that, right? Because security is just one customer of developers, and it's one that doesn't make any money, right? It's the sales folks and marketing folks and customers asking for new features. That's what's typically bringing in the cash. So, as things like Mythos, we'll see how much more work it creates for us, as it finds vulnerabilities. But yeah, John, just, curious to get your thoughts on, if our pipelines, if our buckets are already full, like, how do we pour more stuff in?
Well, I want to be optimistic. I want to be the glass half full, the best that I can be, because I am really, as we mentioned, leaning into how AI has transformed the world. I know I am a little AI pilled. I'll be the first to fall on my sword and say that. I'm not too embarrassed, but I am a little. I'm vibe coding too, but trying to keep that safe and secure. I'm trying to figure out, those agentic workflows, blah, 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 or Mythos, finding vulnerabilities left and right. But I don't want to be sitting on the side where, wow, this could absolutely be a tsunami and tidal wave for offensive security. But let's flip the script and say, look, this could be incredible, sweet superpowers for us on the defensive side, because we've found, we know, we've seen, all these issues, all these flaws, all the things that we can do a little bit better and get smarter and sharper on. If anything, I'm inspired and motivated by kind of the call to action rallying cry of like, hey, let's use this technology and let's keep up. Let's stay with it. Let's keep our ear to the ground and stay on the pulse, because I know Alex has been saying that's job security. And Adrian, as you will say, we have too much to do. Well, now we've got some extra good incentive to keep chasing those ambulances.
And if I may, I wanted to leave a few ideas here from those. I want to hear your thoughts on all those things in the last few minutes that we have. So, for example, you already mentioned dependency version binning, which I think is an awesome idea. So again, it's something that has to be like a development practice where you're fixing the versions. You're not saying, hey, let's use automatically whatever latest, patch version is available. You could say, I'm using 3.4, but the biggest number after that. There's a way to do that on dependencies on software. Don't do that. Tin it. Pick the one you have tested. Like that should be like even operationally should be a great idea.
Known good.
The one thing I have seen very few people talking about, and that actually saved us here at Tenchi because we developed software from the Trivi thing, was on the Trivi case, the hacker went back and changed the binaries for previous versions that had already been released, not only the latest one, right? So we actually cache locally. Once we download a copy of a software version that we pinned, we use the same cached version. We don't go back to the repository every time to bring it over because it could have been changed, right? So that's something we also do, and that I think could help.
That's a great point. That makes complete sense. And goodness, that's sinister to swap all the old back ones.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah, the ones you think are safe. Yeah.
Right? That are not showing up on your SaaS tools, on your list of vulnerable versions. It's devious. And the two things I also don't see being discussed a lot, because there's a lot around the security of the pipelines, right? And so, of course, everyone knows that like developers should not have access to production, like at least not as a regular thing, maybe under specific circumstances, break in case of big glass in case of fire, kind of thing, okay, but not ongoing. But I see very little discussion about least privilege for the credentials or compartmentalization for the credentials of CI/CD pipelines, right? Again, one of the things that saves us before is that we've separated CI from CD. We do CI in GitHub Actions and we do CD inside of the AWS environment. So it's one AWS account publishing code to another one. So even if someone completely hacks my GitHub
different
environment,
platforms,
there's no credentials there that gives anyone any level of write access into the AWS production environment where the application actually runs. So there's a smaller subset of code that I only use for CD that can be compromised and get access to production credentials. Anything I use on my pipeline just for CI will not lead to production credentials being compromised. And even applying least privilege to those credentials that are there. Like if I have write access to an AWS account, does that need to be admin? Or could it have like, it can create a new CloudFormation stack, or it could change this auto scaling group, but it does not have God mode powers, right? So I'm just throwing those out there because those are things you can audit your third parties about, or you can talk to your own development teams about to incorporate into your processes and policies.
That's a super good call out because, again, I think it rings true. Again, falling down the rabbit hole, saying it again, but the basics, the back to basics, like real structure, boilerplate stuff we need to call our security posture good. If it is, principal least privilege, access control, defense in depth, segmentation, redundancy, blah, blah, blah. We all know, but I think there's one I don't think that gets as much love. Maybe, I don't know if you've all heard, but the clean source principle, totally at play here for the supply chain scaries, because that's saying, hey, what you depend on, all of your security dependencies, the devices, the accounts, the systems, those need to be just as trustworthy as what you're trying to protect in the first place. The privilege object that they're accessing, you've got to get that through and through, end to end, buttoned up and safe and secure. So
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I just
there's our homework for everybody. Our clean source principle.
We'll learn from that as well.
Love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
Awesome.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a real treat. I know we kind of drove all over the map here, but I hope there were some good sound bites, some good valuable Fostora.
No, absolutely. John, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Real treat to be here with you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, so that's it for today's show. That's all we've got for this special interview episode of the Allison Supply Chains podcast. Alexandre, also thank you for joining me as well today. Always a pleasure.
Likewise, looking forward to our next regular episode as well.
And if you liked what you heard and you're on a platform where you can like, subscribe, or leave a comment, please do so. We always love that feedback. Stay safe and stay vigilant, and keep an eye out for the April 2026 episode, our normal news coverage episode, which should be launching around the same time as this one.